I'm your host today here on the John Fredericks Show. I'm Bishop E.W. Jackson. Now we've got a special guest who's joined us, Congressman from the 9th Congressional District of Virginia, Morgan Griffith. Congressman, welcome to the John Fredericks Show.
It's good to be with you this morning. I hope you're doing great. I've been listening a little bit, and you're on a roll this morning.
Well, listen, I'm glad you took time out to join us. First of all, before we get into anything else, I do want to get into what's going on in the House. I'm very familiar with the 9th Congressional District, I should say, Southwest Virginia, and you got some wonderful people out there. But when I've run and campaigned out there, I know they often feel forgotten as a part of Virginia. So let's take a moment to talk a little bit about how people out in Southwest Virginia are doing and how the 9th District is doing. What's going on out there, and what are you doing to help those good folks?
Well, the district does feel like sometimes it's forgotten, and I think there's some truth in that. Unfortunately, everybody looks at at Northern Virginia and Eastern Virginia and thinks that's all of Virginia. And I'll tell you a funny story that happens, and I'll tell you one that's kind of sad that was unfortunate this year. Here's the funny one. A lot of times these TV stations will call me up and they say, "Oh, we're going to do an interview when Congress is not in session. And we want you on, 6 or 7 o'clock." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, sure, we're glad to do it, but how you going to get here?" "Oh, no problem. We'll send a truck out." Then they go back and their producers start looking at it, and they assume because it's Virginia, I'm just an hour, maybe 2 hours away. And the 9th District runs from approximately 4 hours away from D.C. all the way up to 8 hours away from D.C. It goes further west than Detroit, Michigan. You've traveled it. You know that.
Yes.
A lot of people in Virginia don't. And it's a long way out there. So, then they'll call me back and they go, something's happened. We can't get the truck there. And it happens all the time. And I just laugh. I say, "Yep, that's what I figured." But, that's just the way it goes. Here's the sad thing that happened this year that was unfortunate in our school systems. And I begged the governor to do a regional approach from the beginning. He's now letting local schools make that decision. He eventually moved to a regional approach. But we closed all the schools down in March. And when we closed the schools down in Virginia in March, there was not a case of coronavirus in the 9th Congressional District.
Wow.
There, in fact, you were 100 miles away. You had to go to Harrisonburg to find the closest case at that time. And I'm not saying the schools shouldn't have been closed at some point in order for everybody to figure out what we were going to do, but we could have kept the schools open in Southwest Virginia at least another week or two. And Dickinson County did not have its first case of coronavirus until June. They could have finished out the school year. Those kids could have kept getting their education. But because they look at Northern Virginia and Eastern Virginia, they don't pay any attention that it's a different geography.
Yep.
It's a long way out there, and you can't have one size fits all for Southwest Virginia. So what I'm trying to do is, preach that message and make sure that people understand that, we've got folks out there. It is the poorest part of Virginia. And so, when you talk about education money and so forth, they need a lot of it to keep their schools running. They've got schools with leaky roofs and things, and the state has to, it's going to have to help out a little bit. But also in D.C., we have to make sure that we're paying attention to that. And I've done some things to try to help in the Appalachian coal fields to reclaim some of that abandoned mine
because that's
land.
exactly where I was going to go next. So how is that whole quest going? Because I know that hits Virginia, Southwest Virginia's economy hard.
It has, and fortunately, I had to do a little fighting on the floor a couple of years ago. Now I think everybody's agreed to. We've got a little program called the Abandoned Mine Line Reclamation Pilot Project. And we're getting some money in to reclaim the mine lands and create for not just the original mine land reclamation program just said you restore it. What we're doing is restoring it with a view towards economic development. And so we've done a number of projects. It's going to take a while for those trees to bear fruit. But within the next year or two, we'll have 2 different 100-plus acre industrial development sites. We're upgrading some of our tourist attractions. We're doing a lot of different things with that money. It's $10 million a year, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it can do a tremendous amount. And the problem is in D.C. is everybody wants to say, stop mining coal, it's bad. Oh, and there'll be other jobs. But when what you have mostly are mountains and trees, there will not be other jobs unless you aggressively and proactively create things like these industrial development sites. One's in the Norton area, and the other one is in Russell County. They've got electricity, they've got all kinds of attributes, but you got to have that in the inventory so that when a company comes looking to create jobs, they've got some place they can go and they say, hey, that's a good spot. It's got electricity, it's got good roads, it's got all the things that we need for our company, and then they can move right in. They don't want to wait 2 years while you develop it. So we're in the process of developing that now.
Good.
And I'm really excited about it now. Sometimes
that sounds
it takes
exciting.
a while.
People don't realize either, those coal mining jobs paid very, very well. And it's not easy to simply replace those jobs. I mean,
Well, let's talk a number. Because a lot of times people will say, well, yeah, but there's more jobs in solar today. Yeah, they are, but solar jobs pay, not that it's bad, pay $35,000, $40,000. A coal mining job would pay $75,000 to $100,000 a year. $75,000 to $100,000 a year. And, you just can't click your fingers and have that happen. And we've had lots of jobs that close down and, the Dollar General opens up and creates a few jobs.
Yeah.
Well, those jobs don't pay anywhere near $75,000 a year.
Exactly. Well, listen, our prayers are certainly with you out there. Now, I've got to talk to you about Nancy Pelosi. You're in the House. She's the Speaker. She's running around calling the virus the Trump virus and giving the president and Republicans a hard time on all the plans of trying to rebuild the economy, trying to deal with this virus in a rational way. So what's your read on how people are feeling in the House right now and what you think is going to happen here in just about 100 days on November 3rd?
Well, it's really hard to tell what's going to happen in 100 days. I will tell you this. Nancy Pelosi is a 100% political animal. It does not matter what would happen. If there was a poll out there that said that people didn't like the fact that the sky was blue, then all of a sudden it would be Donald Trump's fault that the sky was blue. It would be the Republicans in Congress's fault that the sky was blue. I mean, whatever is coming out of her mouth, it's because it's based on what she thinks is going to benefit the Democrats in the fall election. It's a shame. We could get a lot more done. We could get a lot of compromise done. There are things that we should be doing for the United States of America, but she's not going to be willing to do anything unless she thinks there's a political advantage for the Democrat Party. And that's a shame because a lot of us came here on both sides of the aisle. We have different views, but a lot of us came here to get things done. And even some of the Democrats, now they're not going to tell you this publicly, but even some of the Democrats are frustrated that we can't get the things done that we could get done because everything has to run through Nancy Pelosi's office. And she doesn't let us, on the committee and so forth, she doesn't let us just do our will and come out with legislation that's good. We'll get a few pieces across, but it has to make sure it gets Nancy's seal of approval first, or it will not come out of the committee, or it will not show up on the floor. That's not the way you should run the Congress. And if Republicans do that, I'll criticize them too. And they have occasionally, and I've criticized them. That's why I'm a member of the Freedom Caucus, because we don't always do everything right either. But by golly, I've never seen anybody like Nancy Pelosi who was 100% focused only on the politics.
Now, I think back on the days when Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan could go into a room and talk and negotiate, and they had respect for one another. They didn't see eye to eye on everything, obviously, but they had respect for one another, and they thought they were both trying to do what was for the good of the country. I think a lot of people perceive that the Democrat Party at this point has gone so far left that they really represent a kind of socialist vision now for the country. Is it? Are we perceiving it accurately? Because it certainly seems that way.
Yeah, I think that's true. In fact, I made a proposal, which most people just smiled at, but I made a proposal that we nominate AOC to be Speaker 2 years ago because that is now the Democrat Party. That is the wing of the party that controls the party. It's that left-wing socialist. It's not socialist leanings. It's certainly very close. part of that party that, comes up with ideas and thinks they're great. Green New Deal is great. Let's put everybody out of work. Let's make electricity cost more for everybody. Let's not use science and research to come up with ways to use our fossil fuels better, of which we are the number one, not just producer, but the number one supply. We have enough coal in the ground. We have enough natural gas in the ground to supply the world for 100 years, maybe more. And forget using it. Forget finding ways to do it cleaner. We're going to do it, this way. The government's going to control everything, and we're going to make everything better. It is a socialist party today, and that's unfortunate. And we just had because of some of these policing issues, we just had the sheriff of Tazewell County switch parties. And he's always been a good guy, but he was part of that old line, more conservative, more moderate Democrat wing of the party. And there's no place for him left in that party. And he said, some of the local folks are great people and I love them, but I can't deal with what's happening, nationally with the Democrat Party. And he flipped parties. It's just the way it is. If you are a moderate, even a moderate liberal, there's really not a home for you anymore in the Democrat Party.
Now, COVID-19 is obviously top on the agenda. The president just canceled the convention. Curious how you feel about that. But what do you think this COVID-19 situation is going to? How do you think it's going to impact the election? How do you think people are perceiving the job that he's doing in addressing it? Because obviously Nancy Pelosi, as you mentioned earlier, is trying to blame the whole. In fact, she's calling it the Trump virus, which I just find terribly disingenuous and insulting. So how do you think we're managing it? What do you think the likely outcome is going to be as we approach the election?
I don't know. There's a lot of dissatisfaction with the way we've handled it, and I understand that and appreciate that. That is not Trump's fault. He has, for all the criticism he gets for not paying attention to science and not listening to these people, that's exactly what he has been doing. He's been paying attention to Fauci and Redfield at the CDC and all the other doctors. He's been trying to muddle through this the best that he can because he's not a doctor. But he is doing a good job. But this is a virus that was unknown this time last year. It was unknown to the U.S. in December. It was known to the Chinese in December of last year. And so we're all kind of trying to do the best we can. I do think he's right that we need to be working hard to get our kids back to school. It's interesting. Redfield said the same thing on a conference call with the committee yesterday. The American pediatrics folks say, look, okay, maybe people took it a little too far, but we still think the number one goal should be to get these kids back into school. And the president's right about that. He's right to be moving in that direction. Look, every school system needs to make their own decisions. It should not be a federal mandate, just like the masks should not be a federal mandate. But it is something that we're going to have to deal with. But we can't leave our kids on the sidelines until all risk is eliminated. That's ridiculous. There is, risk every day when kids go to school. And so we need to minimize that risk. We need to take steps. We need to help our local school divisions figure out how they can do it the safest way possible. But you can't leave kids out of school until there's a cure or a vaccine. Exactly. Now, we're hopeful there'll be a vaccine by the end of the year. But, the common cold is a coronavirus. We don't have a vaccine for that yet. It's possible that none of these vaccines will work. Now, I will tell you, being on the health subcommittee, we see real good signs from 3, 4, 5 companies that we are probably going to have a vaccine by the end of the year or the first of next year.
Good.
And that is good news. But we can't wait and leave our kids just sitting on the sidelines. And look, I've got kids at home when they went into the electronic teaching, and I know the teachers are getting better and they're trying hard, but it's just not the same as being there live in person. It is not the same, and you need to have that interaction.
And our children are going to be left behind if we simply can't allow that to happen. We can't shut the economy down. We just can't stop living. We've got to figure out a way to manage this thing and yet keep the economy going, educate our children, do those things that we need to do. Well, look, last question before you go. A lot of people are concerned, obviously, about the direction of the country. and about the division in the country and the strife and all of this stuff that's going on. What would you say to people who wonder, my goodness, are we going to hold together as a country? Are we going to be able to maintain this? Or are we looking at some polls have suggested people think within the next 5 years or so we might have a civil war of some kind in the country because the division seems to be just that deep? Serving there in Washington with colleagues on the other side of the aisle, what's your reflection on where we are as a country and how Americans should be looking at this?
Well, I think we all have to get out to vote. I will tell you that I think that Americans are still, moderate conservatives. We are not the socialist country that the Democrat left would like to believe that we are. They've got certain pockets in the big cities. We've got the rest of the country who agrees with us. But if we don't go to the polls, if we don't register and we don't go to the polls and we don't vote, they will run the country. And then some people may get frustrated and resort to violence, and that's not right. We can have our battles at the ballot box, and that's where we should have these battles, and I am confident that we can win these battles. But everybody has to be engaged. Everybody has to understand that it will be a vastly different country if we don't get out and work our tails off to elect, I know you had Bob Good on earlier, to elect, Republicans across the board in the 5th, in the 7th, in the 9th, in the 6th, in the 4th, in the 1st. I mean, all districts.
Yep.
We need to go out and we need to put the push on. Some of them are harder to win than others. But this is not a game. This is about the future of our country. And each and every one of us has an obligation to not only vote ourselves, but to get our friends and our neighbors registered and get them out to vote, because otherwise we're going to be a socialist country, and we're going to have higher costs, and we're going to have fewer jobs, and we're going to see our economy degraded for quite some time. And here's the classic example. People say, things are just go on, whatever. The Chinese had bad leadership about 250 years ago. And for 200 years, they were in absolute poverty. Just now, they're starting to come out of it. And it's not necessarily because of good leadership, but they finally figured out we can pretend to be capitalists and make a little bit of money. But bad leadership and bad decisions can relegate our children and our grandchildren to a lesser U.S. that they deserve. And it's all going to be determined in November. Are we moving forward with a greater America, or are we moving forward with a lesser America? I vote for greater America, and I'm going to be out there campaigning hard for all the candidates on the Republican side.
All right. Well, Morgan, with that solemn warning, which I hope everybody heard, I certainly did, thank you so much for taking time to join us. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, sir, and appreciate what you do.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman. God bless you.